You've seen the claim: Iran has a $1 million missile that splits into hundreds of warheads, and America has no way to stop it. That headline is built to hit your nervous system, not your logic. Because it combines three things that are irresistible to the algorithm: a cheap weapon, a terrifying multiplying effect, and a final sounding conclusion: no way to stop it. So let's do the adult version of this story, because you deserve clarity, not adrenaline. Here's what you're going to get in this breakdown, right now, up front. First, what splits into hundreds of warheads usually really means in modern missile terms, and what it does not mean. Second, why this kind of payload is scary even if it's not a true hundreds of independent warheads situation. Third, whether America truly has no way to stop it, or whether the real danger is something more subtle. Defenses can stop most threats, but the attacker is trying to increase the odds that a few leak through, and a few leaks can change everything. And here's the mini payoff early, so you don't have to wait for the point. The most dangerous part of these multi-submunition missiles isn't that they're magic and unstoppable. It's that they turn one interception problem into many small problems, and they punish the idea of perfect defense. They weaponize probability. Now, let's start with the core confusion that makes this rumor spread. When people hear hundreds of warheads, they imagine a true MIRV weapon, like Cold War ICBMs, where multiple warheads separate and each one hits a different target with precision. That is not what most reporting about Iran's multiple warheads is describing. What's being described in credible reporting is much closer to a cluster-style payload, a warhead that opens in the air and disperses many submunitions over a wide area. That's a totally different concept from precision, independently targetable warheads. Why does that distinction matter? Because it changes the entire claim: America can't stop it. A true MIRV system would be a massive leap in sophistication. It would imply a different class of strategic capability. A cluster-style dispersal warhead is still terrifying, especially over civilian areas, but it's not the same technological category, and it doesn't automatically mean defenses are useless. It means the defender has a harder job and a bigger footprint to manage. Now, what have credible reports actually said? Israeli reporting has described Iranian ballistic missiles carrying cluster bomb warheads that open during descent and disperse submunitions. One detailed report described a warhead spreading around 20 submunitions, each with a few kilograms of explosives, threatening a much wider area than a single warhead impact would. That is a cluster effect. One missile, many explosions. Separately, a major news report noted an Israeli military official said Iran used a missile with multiple warheads, but that there was no immediate independent analysis, and that a research assessment suggested the multiple warheads claim likely refers to submunitions rather than true MIRV technology. That's the key. The credible version of this story is submunitions, not hundreds of independently guided warheads. So where does hundreds come from? Two places. One, exaggeration. Hundreds sounds apocalyptic, and it's easy to round up any number when the audience can't verify it in real time. Two, people blending together different concepts: submunitions, decoys, fragments, and multiple objects on radar, and calling all of it warheads. In a saturated air picture, you can get many tracks. That does not mean you got many precision warheads. Now, I want you to hold on to one simple line, because it's the difference between understanding and panic. A missile that splits doesn't automatically mean it got smarter. Sometimes it means it got messier, and messier can be just as dangerous for civilians. Now let's talk about why a cluster-style ballistic missile payload is still a big deal. Because it changes what success looks like. If your goal is to hit one hardened target, like a bunker, submunitions are not the ideal tool. But if your goal is to create fear, create multiple impact points, overload emergency response, and punish dense urban areas, submunitions are brutally effective. One incoming object turns into multiple problems. Even if most of the submunitions don't hit something important, the psychological effect is huge. People see multiple flashes across a city and they don't experience it as one missile. They experience it as, we got hit everywhere. That's the psychological design. And there's another ugly layer that makes cluster munitions especially feared: unexploded submunitions. Some percentage can fail to detonate on impact and remain hazardous afterward. That turns one attack into a lingering threat. Now, does this mean America has no way to stop it? That's where the headline crosses into manipulation, because stop it can mean three different things, and the headline doesn't tell you which one it means. Does stop it mean intercept the missile before it reaches the target area? That is absolutely something US and allied systems are designed to try to do, using layered air and missile defense networks. Does stop it mean guarantee zero submunitions ever land anywhere? No defense can guarantee perfection under sustained attack. Does stop it mean prevent fear and disruption? That's even harder, because fear is the payload. So the honest answer is, there are ways to intercept and reduce harm, but there may not be a way to guarantee a perfect shield against every leaker in a prolonged, saturated environment, especially if attackers are targeting the sensors and radars that give defenders early warning. And that last part is crucial, because what changes the fight isn't just the missile, it's the eyes. Missile defense is a chain: detect, track, identify, decide, engage. If the attacker can degrade the radars and communications nodes that underpin the network, it becomes harder to see early, harder to coordinate, and harder to choose the best engagement timing. That's exactly why recent reporting has focused on Iran hitting radar infrastructure that supports US and allied air and missile defense. Now, here's the part most people don't want to hear because it kills the unstoppable weapon fantasy. The core contest in missile warfare isn't who has the fastest missile, it's who can sustain the exchange. How many threats can you launch? How many can you intercept? How fast can you replenish? How well can you keep your sensors alive? This is why a $1 million missile framing is so powerful. It's not really about the price tag, it's about the exchange rate. If a defender has to spend very expensive interceptors to stop a relatively cheap incoming threat, especially if it's repeated, then even successful defense becomes a strategic strain. That's not new. That's been the logic of missile and drone warfare for years. What's new is how visible it is now. Now let's address the claim $1 million. Some ballistic missiles can cost far more than that, depending on the system, the fuel type, the guidance package, and production scale, and some drones can be far cheaper. But the exact price isn't the point. The point is the economic asymmetry. Offense can be cheaper per shot than defense, especially when defense relies on high-end interceptors. That said, there's a trap here. People hear cheap missile and assume Iran can do this endlessly. But inventory and production constraints are real. Even if Iran has large stockpiles, advanced systems and specialized warheads are not infinite. That's why you see analysts talk about Iran shifting tactics, sometimes smaller barrages, sometimes different combinations, because it's managing resources too. Now, let's talk about what a splitting warhead does to interception, because this is where the headline has a kernel of truth. If a defender intercepts late, near the target area, and the payload disperses, you can still end up with debris or submunitions falling across a wide zone. So timing matters. But timing is not a simple choice when you're under saturation, radar pressure, and mixed threats. Defenders have to make decisions with imperfect information and short timelines, and the attacker is trying to compress those timelines, complicate classification, and create confusion. This is why the most dangerous moments aren't always the big barrages. The most dangerous moments are when the defense is tired, sensors are degraded, and the attacker changes the pattern. Now, I want to give you the single best way to tell whether this hundreds of warheads story is reality or marketing. Ask one question: is it repeatable? If Iran truly has a weapon that splits into hundreds of warheads in a reliable way, you would expect consistent patterns across multiple attacks. Consistent dispersal behavior, consistent numbers, consistent impact footprints, consistent official descriptions from multiple independent sources. If instead you see wildly changing numbers, 20, 80, hundreds, depending on who's posting, you're watching a narrative inflate. And that's exactly what happens in war. The number grows as the story travels. Now, let's address America has no way to stop it from a strategic lens, because this is where the conclusion is simply wrong as stated. America and its partners absolutely have ways to reduce the threat. Layered missile defense exists. Early warning satellites and radar networks exist. Ship-based systems exist. Fighters and electronic warfare exist. And the entire U.S. approach to missile defense is built around the idea that you intercept threats in layers, not in one perfect shield. But here is what is true, and this is the part the viral headline is clumsily pointing at. No system can promise 100% success against every combination of threats forever, especially under sustained attack and sensor degradation. So the more honest version is, the threat can be mitigated but not eliminated with certainty, and the attacker's goal is to raise the leak probability and the psychological cost. That's not no way to stop it. That's no way to guarantee perfection. Now let's talk about the emotional trap that makes people share this claim. When people feel unsafe, they look for two kinds of stories. Either, we're totally protected, or, we're totally doomed. Those are both comfort stories because they remove uncertainty, but real security is uncertainty management. So the adult stance is uncomfortable. Defenses can work extremely well and still be under strain, and a small number of penetrations can still occur. That's the reality of probability warfare. Now, let's make this practical. What does this mean for the next phase of the conflict? There are three plausible paths. Path 1, the hundreds of warheads story collapses into cluster submunitions and defenses adapt. In this path, the scary label fades, but the underlying threat remains. Dispersal warheads are dangerous and create wide area hazards, but they don't represent a strategic technological revolution. Path 2, the attacker leans into the psychological effect. Even limited use of dispersal warheads can create huge fear. In this path, the goal is less about destroying military targets and more about multiplying public pressure. Path 3, the most dangerous one, sensor degradation plus saturation creates more leakers. If the radar and command networks underpinning defense are degraded and attacks continue, the likelihood of occasional penetrations can rise. That's not because defenses don't work, but because the chain is being stressed at multiple points at once. And if you want the real, what they're not telling you part, it's this. The war is becoming as much about sustaining the defensive network as it is about stopping any one missile. Because the attacker can lose missiles and still win leverage if the defender gets exhausted, runs low on interceptors, or has to pull back high-value assets to reduce exposure. That's how pressure campaigns work. Now let's end with a clean conclusion you can repeat without becoming part of the panic machine. Iran's splitting missile story is most credibly understood as a cluster-style submunition warhead, not a true hundreds of independently targetable warheads MIRV capability. That type of payload is still dangerous because it increases area harm, multiplies impact points, and can leave unexploded hazards. America does have ways to reduce the threat through layered air and missile defense, but no defense can guarantee perfection under sustained, complex attack, especially if sensors and radars are being targeted. So the real story isn't unstoppable. The real story is probability warfare, where the attacker is trying to increase leak odds and the defender is trying to keep the leak rate low enough, long enough, that confidence holds. Now here's the question I want you to answer. Do you think the bigger danger is the weapon itself, or the way this kind of dispersal payload amplifies fear and political pressure, even if most incoming threats are intercepted? Sources for verification. Times of Israel explainer on Iranian cluster missile submunitions. AP reporting noting multiple warheads likely refers to submunitions rather than MIRV. Wall Street Journal reporting on Iran targeting radar systems underpinning U.S. missile defenses. Arms Control Association overview of U.S. missile defense programs.